So we learned how to factor, then we learned how to solve using factoring, then we learned how to simplify square roots, and now we're going to solve equations using square roots, and it will involve simplifying radicals. So, first of all, I apologize if you're listening to this video if my voice sounds like a guy going through puberty. I'm trying really hard to sound normal, but my voice is just not really there. Okay, before we get started, I want you to think about the equation x squared equals 16. To undo the square, you use a square root. So we would take the square root of both sides. On the left side, the square root and the square cancel each other out, leaving you with x. On the right side, what is the square root of 16? 4. Because, if you go back to the original equation, 4 squared is 16. Is there another number that you can multiply by itself to give you positive 16? What about negative 4? Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. So really, the solutions are positive or negative 4. So here's the deal. Yesterday, the square roots were already on the paper for you. If the square roots are already there, you assume the positive answer only. If you have to put a square root into the equation in the process of solving, you have to assume both the positive and negative root. So here's the steps. Get whatever is squared by itself. That's what isolate means. And then this should say square root both sides of the equation. This is the important thing. Remember the plus minus sign. So when you put a square root into an equation, you must put a plus minus in front of it. All right, let's go to example 1. The first thing we would do is add 6 to both sides. So we have 4x squared equals 48. Then we would divide both sides by 4. X squared equals 12. To undo the square, we square root both sides. Don't forget to put a plus minus in front of that square root. On the left side, the square root and the square cancel each other out, so we have x equals plus minus. We need to simplify the square root of 12. So over to the side, I'll take the square root of 12 and simplify it. What perfect square can we divide out of 12? 4. So the square root of 12 simplifies to 2 times the square root of 3. X equals positive or negative 2 times the square root of 3. Number 3. What should we do first? Subtract 3. So negative 5x squared equals negative 12. And then we want to divide by negative 5. No decimals. Leave this as the fraction 12/5. To get rid of the square on the x, we need to square root both sides. Don't forget about the plus minus. So x is going to equal plus minus. We need to take this square root of 12 over 5, and if you remember from yesterday, we can't leave a fraction under the radical. So over here on the side, we've got the square root of 12 over the square root of 5. What should we multiply the top and the bottom by to get rid of the square root of 5? The square root of 5. So on the top, we will have the square root of 60. On the bottom, square root of 5 times square root of 5 is 5. The square root of 25, which is 5. Then what do you suppose we need to do with the square root of 60 on the top? We need to simplify that. So I don't know how you want to show your work. The work tends to be kind of messy on these problems. You have the work from solving the equation. You have the work from simplifying the radical. It's all kind of messy and mismatched and whatever, but find a way to make it work. So square root of 60, if I simplify that, half of 60 is 30. So think about the next biggest perfect square below 30, 25. Can you do 60 divided by 25? Decimal. 60 divided by 16. 60 divided by 9. 60 divided by 4. Yes. So square root of 4 and 15. So our simplified thing, and you're probably running out of space, but it's 2 square root of 15 on the top and 5 on the bottom. So x equals positive or negative 2 times the square root of 15 over 5. Because your work is likely going to be very messy with the solving work, the simplifying work, all this stuff mashed in here, whenever you have your final answer, neatly circle it or box it. Make it very obvious that this is my final answer. On a test or a quiz, if I give you a box to put your answer in, just make sure that you put that final answer in that box so I can see what you ended up with. All right, turn the page and try the next two on your own. If you're listening to this video, I'm sorry. My 5th hour is a little bit loud sometimes. Wow. In this particular case, you end up with x squared equals 4. When you take the square root of both sides, you get x equals positive or negative 2. In number 4, the first thing that you need to do is deal with this minus 2. You can undo minus 2 by adding 2 on both sides. How do you undo divided by 6? And you might start to notice that when we're doing these problems, do you see how much space I leave after my equal sign before the number? Because I know the next step is square root with a plus minus, and I want to make sure I have room for that so I'm not like shoving it in a tiny little space. So x equals positive or negative. We need to take the square root of 12 and simplify that. Okay. What if your squared term is a set of parentheses? Now take a look at number 6. We're actually going to do number 6 first, and then we'll go back and do number 5. Number 6, when you see a 2 in front of a set of parentheses, what are you tempted to do? Okay, now I'm going to be a little bit ridiculous about this, but you can't distribute. Okay, let me be super ridiculous. And am I making my point here? Oops, I need pink. Hey, by the way, you can't distribute. Did y'all get that? You can't distribute. You can't distribute. You can't distribute. Okay, now why can't you distribute? According to PEMDAS, I should probably get a pen back. What does the E in PEMDAS stand for? What does the M stand for? Multiply. Did you know that the distributive property is really just multiplication? So you cannot multiply 2 times x because there's an exponent. You have to deal with the exponent before you try to do any kind of multiplication. So what we need to do is isolate the squared term. We need to get rid of the minus 6. We need to get rid of the times 2. So get rid of the minus 6 by adding 6 on both sides. Um, 18. And then divide both sides by 2. This is 2 times, so to undo it, you would divide both sides by 2. So we have x plus 5 squared equals 9. We have the squared term isolated. X plus 5 is the squared term. It's by itself. There's nothing in front of it. There's nothing after it. So we can square root both sides. And when we put a square root in, we have to put a plus minus in front of it. What is the square root of 9? So you have positive or negative 3. On the left side, the square root and the square cancel each other out. And once the square isn't there, the parentheses aren't necessary either. How would you finish this problem? So we'd subtract 5 on both sides. Here's how I'm going to write it. X equals negative 5 plus minus 3. This symbol means do the problem twice. Once with the plus, and the next time with the minus. So what is negative 5 plus 3? And what is negative 5 minus 3? So your solutions are negative 2 and negative 8. If both of these numbers are not stuck under a radical, you can combine them. Combine them once using addition, once using subtraction. Now let's look at number 5. How can we get rid of this 1/3 times? Divide both sides by 1/3, or dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal 3. So we have x plus 5 squared equals 21. What should I do next? Radical on both sides. Don't forget your plus minus. On the left side, we have plain old x plus 5. On the right side, can we simplify the square root of 21? 16, 9, 4, no. So leave this as plus minus the square root of 21. How would you finish this problem? Subtract 5. So I'm going to put negative 5 plus minus the square root of 21. These two things are not the same type of number. Negative 5 is an integer. 21 is a radicand. It's stuck under the radical. You can't combine them because they're not the same types of numbers. So you simply leave it as negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 21. You just stick, when you're subtracting 5 on both sides, you just stick that in right in front of the plus minus.